to the Sober Witch Life podcast. We're here for another episode, and today's topic's pretty big. But if you happen to listen to last week's, or just listen to last week's, I am out of the woods. I think with whatever was trying to take me down. So I had a cold. It lasted about 10 days. Got a little bit of a cough still lingering. So I do have some delicious tea right here, but feeling much better. So today's topic that we are talking about was brought up because of all of this 90 days of shadow work that we are currently doing within the Recovery Coven. And so, we went through in January, we went through fear, right? A lot of prompts around fear. In February, it was shame and guilt. And we are now in our last stretch of this 90 days. And we're talking about like self-loathing, right? It's the best word that I can use to describe this self-loathing, I've referred to it sometimes as self-flagellation, like how we will kind of beat ourselves up or punish ourselves because there's this unconscious belief that we're not worthy of like peace and ease and love and joy and all that, all these kinds of things, right? So, of course, I've written a blog post. If you like to read, you can go find that. But I'm going to try to go through the same content because I thought it was so good today. And it's really talking about what I realized as I was writing the article. It's like, I'm talking about these other things that I stepped into recovering from. So I've often stated that I'm a recovering alcoholic, workaholic, perfectionist, and control freak. And so this self-loathing is like the workaholism, the perfectionism, and the control freaks. And so, even as I sat down to write today, one of the things that I was thinking about was like, when was the last time that this like self-loathing or this self-critic popped into mind? And it was literally this morning, right? So I don't care that I've had 6.5 years in recovery. Like, this is work. This is shadow work I do on a regular basis. Okay. So I wake up and I have to walk through my ritual room in order to come downstairs. I live in a bungalow, and so my room's upstairs. And so I have to walk through the ritual room. And so I'm walking through the ritual room, right? And I love this. I love the fact that I have to do this. Like, my big working altar is up there. All of my supplies is up there. My little meditation station. And right in front of my altar is a vibration plate. I've had that vibration plate for a short amount of time, but my morning ritual that I have is I would step on the vibration plate, say my prayers, any of my well wishes or anything like that, allowing the kind of vibration and movement to move through me. And do some of my other, morning rituals. And then I would come downstairs and I'd finish up, the journaling and all of that kind of lovely stuff here at the desk. So I wake up this morning. Mind you, I have been sick for like 10 days. This started not last Thursday, a week ago last Thursday. So I've been under the weather for quite a long bit of time. And as I said, the cough is still lingering. And last night felt like it was probably the first night's sleep that I'd had where I slept deeply. See, look at the talking's even gonna still kind of get me. And I walked in that ritual room. I looked at the vibration plate, and automatically in my head was this statement: I should do my morning ritual. Mind you, we had daylight savings time on Sunday. So I was robbed of like an hour of like normal sleep. So where I would normally wake up at 8, it was like 9 right now. I wish there was a way to pause this, but I'm live, so you're going to get this. And so I should do my morning ritual. And this wasn't like a suggestion, right? This should was a judgment. And so immediately I rolled my eyes at myself. And instead of letting that thought run, excuse me, I paused and I gently shifted it. I reminded myself that I had slept better last night, better than I had in the last 10 days and well over a week, that my body needed the rest, that I had been prioritizing rest over anything else, right, in order to get over what I have. So I told myself the moment I like recognize this, I got a great night's sleep. That felt really, really good. And honestly, today is the best that I have felt in the last 10 days. And that was a really small moment, but it mattered because what surfaced in that moment, in this should statement, is something so many of us in recovery know well. And that is this quiet voice of self criticism that if we leave it unchecked, will turn into flow blown self loathing, right? Punishment. And I've got to be honest with you, like that inner voice, when it starts turning around, like it's not pleasant, right? It is very critical. And it's not like disappointment. It's not like, oh, you like, it is like going back. It's going back to the perfectionism, that workaholism, and that control. It looks at what I've done, it looks at what I haven't done, and it can scan, if I allow it to just linger, right? This self criticism, it'll look for all sorts of perfection. It'll like assemble a list of all of the things that could have been done better, right? Mind you, I believe in constructive criticism. I believe that there is a place in our lives where reflection becomes incredibly important because it helps us to grow. Learning from mistakes is part of becoming wiser. But that inner voice that we get into, right? And I'm not talking about sitting down and reflecting and doing the writing, doing the journaling, doing the shadow work. I'm talking about like, you know what I'm talking about. This like inner voice that starts creeping in, talking to us. It's not where we want to be at when it comes to like reflection. When we allow ourselves to be in this critical path, this like criticism to live within our mind, it stops being helpful and it starts becoming punishment. It is a form of suffering. And as I mentioned, it is these three identities, so to speak, that these are coming from for me, right? I'm a recovering workaholic, perfectionist, and a control freak. The workaholic says, you need to do more. There's more for you to do. Keep going. The perfectionist says, I think you can do better. That's not quite good enough. And the control freak, well, they're kind of a bit of an a-hole because they say, hey, that's not the way that it should be done. Right? Like there's only one correct way to do things. If the three of these start talking at the same time, they can become a pretty loud committee for me. But today, though, I recognize them when they show up, and that recognition changes everything. But I'm going to take it back to that perfectionism when I first recognized it. I was in my 20s, okay? I was living with somebody for the first time. I had a partner. We'd been together, I think at this particular point, maybe like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And I began to notice something about myself in the house. If they clean the apartment differently than how I would have, I'd get irritated. And we're not talking like just mildly annoyed, right? I would be genuinely irritated. Like if the dishes weren't put away in the way that I wanted them put away, if the floors weren't clean the way that I would clean them, if the laundry wasn't folded in the way I like, it would. And these are small things, right? We're not talking about big deals, as in like never cleaning the kitchen, right? These little things. And I would brush them off until they would build up inside of me and I'd eventually explode. And now I'd throw every one of them at my partner. After this happened enough times, I had to realize that my perfectionism was not improving the situation or the way the apartment looked. It was damaging my relationship. So I started to retrain my thoughts at that time. Each time I felt the irritation arising, I would pause. I would remind myself that there was no such thing as perfection. I would tell myself that he was doing the best he knew how to do. And if something really, really mattered, I could do it myself. To remind myself of working on this pattern, I even took a picture that was hanging on the wall and made it ever so slightly crooked, right? So that every time I saw it, it would remind me of this work that I was doing. That reframing helped a ton at home. It softened the tension that had been building. I still use it to this day because, not gonna lie, it still pops up to me, right? But I don't police it like I once was. Like I'll catch myself in it, and it's usually a sign that there's something else going on, right? Something else that I need to look at. But what I realized is that the perfectionism having kind of like, I don't know, finding a place of comfort with it in my personal life didn't mean that it disappeared. It simply shifted. It would show up in other ways, that perfectionist voice. And it appeared in my work. It appeared in the expectations that I had of myself, how I measured whether or not I was doing enough or working hard enough or focused on the right things. And the reality is in a lot of environments, a lot of work environments, this trait can be and is rewarded. Being detailed oriented and holding high standards can look like discipline or ambition from the outside. But beneath the surface, all of this pressure was still the same. I learned to quiet that perfectionism in one situation, but it was continuing to show up in other ways in my life, right? And before I'd stepped into recovery, I really wasn't aware of this self loathing voice like I am now. Like I knew this kind of glimpse into perfectionism, but I wasn't aware of all the other ways it was showing up, right? Because frankly, alcohol was silencing it. I had a very predictable pattern in life, right? I would push myself relentlessly through the day, that workaholism, right? I would try to do everything perfectly. I was very well respected in my corporate career. And eventually I would allow myself a drink, right? I'd come home and I'd allow myself a drink. Maybe it wasn't every day all the time, but let's be real, it was more days than not. And this was permission. It was permission to relax, to stop trying so hard, to let loose, right? And for a few hours every night, that critic went quiet. Of course, the next morning, different story. It was wild to discover that research shows that people who experience high levels of self criticism or perfection are at a greater risk for substance use disorder, right? Substances can temporarily relieve the stress created by harsh internal judgment, but that relief is always temporary and the underlying pattern just grows stronger over time. In other words, the alcohol never healed that voice, it just muted it. So when I first entered recovery, that voice became impossible to ignore. And it wasn't just like once a day, it was like constant, right? Every decision felt like it was being graded. I'd compare myself to other people in recovery. I would wonder if I was doing it well enough. I would say that I wasn't doing it well enough. It doesn't even matter if I do anything. I was questioning whether I was growing fast or handling situations right. This perfectionism, the workaholism, the control freak, it found a new arena to operate in. I was trying to be perfect in recovery. Oh, God. Thankfully that phase softened with time, and each day, wow. Anytime I feel my voice being stolen like that, it feels like there are hands that wrap around it. So, yeah, we're going to Seriously, lately I have felt like something is trying to keep me from talking. So it must mean what I have to say is important to be said, right? Anyway, all of those like critics quieted over time, softened, loosened their grip, so to speak. But even after 6.5 years in recovery, I catch a glimpse of them every time to time, like the one I shared in the beginning. That's why being aware of this matters. Rough. Psychologists have spent decades studying self criticism, and the findings are pretty harsh. This inner critic is strongly associated with depression, anxiety, and addictive behaviors. One reason is that the self critic activates the brain's threat system. When we attack ourselves internally, the nervous system responds as if we're under attack, right? We're under danger. Our stress hormones rise, our emotional regulation decreases, and the brain begins searching for relief. For a lot of people, substance is that relief. And it might not even be just substances. It can be just the addictive behaviors. It can be the doom scrolling. It can be the overworking out, right? It can be anything that we choose to do to kind of numb or remove ourselves from being present. Remove ourselves from the awareness that the self-critic, that work that we need to do to address the self-critic. Research also shows, though, that there is a hopeful solution, right? That consistent self-compassion significantly reduces relapse risk and strengthens emotional resilience and recovery. The way that we speak to ourselves has a measurable impact on our ability to heal. From a spiritual perspective, the effects go even deeper, right? When someone is trapped in self-loathing, their inner energetic state changes. Instead of circulating through emotions like peace and love and hope and happiness and joy, right? They're anchored in much lower, heavier emotional frequencies. If you were to ever look at Dr. David Hawkins' map of consciousness, it describes emotions kind of along this energetic frequency spectrum. And at the lower end, we're going to find shame, guilt, apathy, fear, grief. On the higher end, acceptance, love, and joy. Self-loathing keeps us in those lower states. It becomes this pattern of self-punishment. We keep oscillating through the shame, the guilt, the apathy, the shame, the guilt, the apathy, right? Every time someone tries to move forward, the inner critic will find a way to kind of knock them back down. And eventually, a dangerous belief can come about. Why even bother trying? And I've heard that sentence from people in recovery more than once. Every time I do, I know that the self-loathing, the self-punishment, the self-flagellation is hiding underneath it. Which may have you asking, why in the world do we have this pattern? Right? Here's my belief. Most of us were never taught how to truly love, honor, and respect ourselves, right? There was never a class in grade school that taught us this. There wasn't a curriculum throughout high school. It just didn't exist. Even any of us that, like myself, that were brought up in a religious tradition, right? I was brought up in the Catholic Church, went to a Catholic school. It still didn't happen, right? To truly love, honor, and respect ourselves. We were taught to love, honor, and respect our parents, God, the church, but ourselves? Now, as children, we're taught to achieve. From a very young age, we are graded and evaluated, right? Do you get A's, B's, C's? What does your report card look like? They become a measure of our worth, right? We're taught to strive for excellence rather than just being encouraged to grow. And if you fall outside of that prescribed path, the message can become even harsher. You're not doing it right. You're not like everyone else. You're not enough, let alone being punished, like literally punished for it. I'm at the age, that I come before a lot of where you'd have a lot of these, programs for children nowadays. You can get in, I think they're called IEPs and things like that. It didn't happen when I was a kid, right? When I was growing up, granted, I went to a Catholic school, and if you got poor grades, you were kicked out. Like, you weren't allowed to go to the school. There was no alternative. Can you imagine the shame that a child might have felt if they literally had learning disabilities, you know, or needed to learn things differently? And then life adds even more layers, right? Even outside of school. Our parents are often carrying their own wounds. Our parents are carrying their own wounds and unintentionally pass down these fears, these insecurities, these I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, right? Addiction creates its whole set of things, right? We have behaviors that we do as we're, you know, under the influence that damage trust. Society tells us what we should be doing. Going to high school, going to college, getting your degree. And as I said, then we toss in any of the religious frameworks. And eventually, a lot of people feel and believe that they deserve to be punished for just being who they are. Even years into recovery, there are some people that still carry this belief, maybe even it's unconscious, that they deserve to feel bad, that they deserve to feel the shame and the guilt that they feel for the actions that they took in their past. But that belief is not the truth of who we are. At a spiritual level, the soul is not defective, it is divine. Recovery is not about becoming someone new, it's about remembering who you truly are. In what I teach, recovery is understood as a sacred return to wholeness. It's the process of reclaiming personal sovereignty, reconnecting with your soul, and remembering that healing in and itself is divine work. When people begin to reconnect to that truth, something really powerful happens. The shame begins to loosen, the stories soften, that critic quiets, and life starts opening up again. How might you do this? You might be wondering. I began a simple practice about 1.5 years ago, right? That I'm pretty positive was triggered out of one of the weekly witches recovery circles. I write down 3 questions each day in my journal, or I reflect on 3 things, right? How did I nourish my mind? How did I care for my body? And how did I connect with spirit? Every single day. They're really simple. I literally put mind, body, spirit, and then I write what it is. I can see patterns in my life when I do this. When these areas are receiving the attention that they need, I know I'm tending to myself. I know I'm less likely to fall into a pattern of self-criticism. And some days the actions are really small, right? Nourishing the mind might just be making sure that I eat a really well-balanced meal that day, right? Something that supports my nervous system, taking my vitamins, right? Because I believe food and what we fuel our body has more to do with our mind than it really does anything else. Caring for the body might just be some kind of gentle movement like stretching. Connecting with spirit might just be making sure that I say my daily prayer. On my most balanced day, my morning and my evening rituals take about 15 to 20 minutes. I've had a really good and amazing, just really nutrient dense meal. And I've done something in movement wise like deep cleaned a room in the house, or gone out and taken a lovely walk in nature. But even when life interrupts my like desired routine, these questions keep me grounded in self-care, because that critic shows up when we've stopped tending to and caring for ourselves. It does. Um, it doesn't show up directly, right? It's not just like one day we start. It's like little. It hides behind our behaviors, right? Perfectionism is one of them that I've discussed, right? Overworking can be another one. In the witch community, a lot of folks that I uh, hear talk about two patterns: people pleasing and caretaking for everyone else. And the reality is, helping others is incredibly beautiful. It is part of what I believe makes us as a witch, being of service to others in this world, right? But when you spend all of your time tending to everyone else and neglecting yourself, it can be avoidance. It can be a sign of avoiding. Staying busy keeps us from sitting with the parts of ourselves that still need to be healed. When you do choose to rewrite these stories, to recognize them, to become aware of them, to not allow the self-critic a seat at your mental table, your healing is going to accelerate. Your trauma begins to loosen its grip. Addictions lose their power. We begin to experience more joy, more love, more peace, more creativity. We can recognize our purpose. And for some people, we may start to experience something that we haven't felt in a while, which is desire. And I'm not talking about desire driven by ego or escapism, right? Because desire on that map of consciousness is considered a low vibration, right? It's considered a low energetic. It can lead to cravings. I'm talking about the type of desire that we have to create, to connect, to live fully. When our desires become aligned with love and courage and safety and creativity, they become an alchemical catalyst for transformation. If this is resonating with you, I invite you to pause for a moment and just reflect. When in your life do you still speak to yourself with unnecessary cruelty? What emotions may be hiding beneath that voice? And today, what's one gentle act that you could take to support your mind, your body, and your spirit? I'm telling you, you do not need to earn your worth. There is no need to achieve perfection. You just have to remember something that has always been true. Always. From the moment you've been born. Is that you are already enough, and you are deserving and worthy of a beautiful life. Until next time, my dear friends, much love from me to all of you.